Hi YouTube, this is vidhead85 here, and I just want to talk a little bit about something that I often notice on the Republican side, and that's simply an adoration of former President Ronald Reagan as a conservative, as someone who made tough decisions, and he saved Social Security, and how Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan are often seen as the great bipartisan compromise. However, the real story behind that is that it wasn't quite as genial as the Republicans make it out to be, because Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill had a very antagonistic relationship, and Ronald Reagan called him basically Pac-Man, a round thing that eats up things, and Tip O'Neill called former President Ronald Reagan Herbert Hoover with a smile. Now, the main thing about Ronald Reagan is he was charismatic. You could definitely see how his easygoing nature endeared him to many Americans in that 1980 debate against Jimmy Carter. And when Jimmy Carter decided that he was going to press forward with the right-wing element of Reagan's record, Ronald Reagan, former President Reagan, just simply then Republican candidate Ronald Reagan said, "There you go again." And today, often I see that with a lot of conservatives on the Republican side of the aisle, when every time they talk about liberals and you're a hard liberal, all I have to say is, there you go again. And simply the fact of who is the real Ronald Reagan? Who is who is this larger than life myth of a man? That's simply like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A lot of people admired him, and he was very charismatic. Well, actually, I think he wasn't as charismatic as Reagan. I believe, from what I read, he was a little rough. But so was Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was another Republican who really went after a lot of the basically a lot of things that Obama's going after now. But Ronald Reagan kind of opened that up. Even though he is credited with saving the economy, he only saved it for the upper echelon of Americans, and he laid off so many workers. He laid off a lot of public workers, busted up the airport, the pilots unions, and yet is credited as one of the greatest fiscal conservatives in modern history. However, when you really look at a nonpartisan support, you will find that Ronald Reagan is actually the biggest spender in American history since Eisenhower, and the big liberal spender Obama is actually the smallest spender since Eisenhower. Up until then, it was former President Bill Clinton. But who is this larger than life fiscal conservative who was not a conservative, who after he lowered taxes in 1981, he raised them ever since. There was embassy bombings on his watch in 1984, and the next day he went to Iowa. Yet Obama is blamed for going to Nevada for a fundraiser, which is the same thing that Ronald Reagan did in 1984. He is also Ronald Reagan is also credited with being tough on immigration. However, he offered asylum to 3 million people who were in the country who were undocumented in this country. So I recently watched a video of a person saying, "Why do you say that Ronald Reagan is this big conservative when all the evidence, all the nonpartisan reports say that he's not?" It's simply his charisma. The bottom line about Ronald Reagan is his charisma. And I have to say, even as a liberal, I'm drawn to Ronald Reagan, mainly what he said, mainly what his public persona was. I might even talk to my friend Bruce Kogan and say, you know what, give me some good movies that former President Ronald Reagan was in. He was an easygoing, gentlemanlike person. He is very much what Obama is today. But I think that Reagan was a lot more liberal than a lot of people would like to believe. Yes, he was very conservative, I guess, for his time, but by today's standards, by Tea Party standards, he would be so liberal that he would never have gotten the nomination for the Republican candidacy. And even right now, I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan would not understand. He would not know his party. Even though he may have been on the family's values side of it a lot and the economic side of it, many of the other social parts about it, as far as the obstruction would have been, he probably would have been primaried and lost today. So the mythical Ronald Reagan is simply someone who conservatives can admire, but the real Ronald Reagan is a liberal hippie guy, I guess. And the only reason that they admire him now is because of the time that he was in. The Reagan resurgency of republicanism. The Republican Reagan resurgency. That was basically what that was. But if anything, would the real Ronald Reagan please stand up? And let me tell you, Ronald Reagan was not a fiscal conservative or a great economic steward. You look at the nonpartisan reports and you see, hands down, Democrats are better for the economy. Whether or not you agree with me, it doesn't matter. It's simply put that Ronald Reagan is not this conservative legend that Michelle Bachmann, that Chuck Norris, that Mike Huckabee, that Mitt Romney said that he was. He would not have a political career today. See you later. Have a great day, YouTube.